Caroline Lucas, our party leader, someone that set an incredible example in terms of how politics should be done and should be done ethically over the last few years. I had the pleasure of speaking at a public meeting with Caroline last night in Lancaster, which I've got to say was fabulously attended and very warm reception. And when you do meetings like that, and you see the way that a speaker like Caroline can motivate a crowd, motivate an audience to come and participate afterwards, you realise just what a wonderful asset she is to this party. So I'd like you to put your hands together. A very, very warm welcome for Caroline Lucas. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, everyone. And a particular thanks to our hosts here in Blackpool and in the Northwest for making us so very welcome. As Peter said, I've already had the chance to meet many talented and committed activists from around the region and to hear about some of the work and the successes that the Green Party has had here in Lancaster and Lancashire. And we've known and admired the way that the Greens have broken through onto Lancaster City Council, almost doubling their number of seats to 12. But now, coming here, we see the benefits for local people. Councillors who are prepared to back local business and to challenge short-sighted developments like the Centros shopping centre. Councillors who will fight for our environment and against the road-building madness of the Heysham bypass. And councillors who will fight to protect vital public services. These are the kinds of Greens councillors that we're seeing all around the country. Greens delivering for their community, being honest about the challenges that we face, and making decisions not on political calculation or, for that matter, on Mediterranean yachts, but on the basis of what is right. No wonder when people see Greens in action, they want more. And having more members joining us is the best vote of confidence that I can think of. It's a sign of a political party that is reaching out to people and convincing them that there is a way to succeed in politics without compromising your principles. And so, as we prepare to launch our European election campaign, it is the Green Party which offers the genuine alternative, both to the three grey Westminster parties and to the growing threat from the BNP. Because here in the Northwest, it is our lead candidate, Peter Craney, who stands between Nick Griffin and the policies of hate which he represents, and a seat in the European Parliament. And I don't know about you, but I can't think of many more resolute and steadfast people than Peter in their opposition to bigotry and racism, nor anyone more committed to standing up for justice and equality. But we, the Greens, stand for honesty with the electorate, facing up to the hard choices, and making decisions based on justice and fairness for all, whoever they are and wherever they live on our planet. Was there ever a time when these values were needed more than now? When people lose faith in politics, we are all worse off, because they lose faith in the idea that we can make the world a better place, that we can tackle challenges like climate change or world poverty, that we can reduce the inequality in our society, the unfairness, the discrimination, and in so doing, tackle all manner of problems, from crime to mental illness. Now, there are people who peddle the line that during a recession, green issues must take second place, as if caring about whether the clothes we wear are produced by child labour is just another fashion, in this week and out the next. As if the environment or social justice were a luxury that can be given up, like that extra cappuccino on the way to work. We know what a bogus line that is. We know that in hard times we're needed all the more. Ask the people of Sipson. Do they think that stopping their houses being demolished to make way for the new runway at Heathrow is a luxury? Is campaigning to reduce the number of children killed on our streets by bringing in 20-mile-an-hour residential zones a distraction from the real business of politics? Do agency workers laid off without any rights or compensation think that social justice is simply a middle-class fad? So let's be clear, and I'll say it again. The Green Party is needed now more than ever. Since we met in London last September, the recession has really hit home. People are losing their jobs, councils are cutting vital services, businesses are being pushed under through lack of credit. We had the boom, and now we have the bust. And are we surprised? No. Because for years, Greens have been warning against the cocktail of irresponsible policies that have fueled this recession. Take the banks. We knew that mutual societies, with their roots in local communities, serving their members, looking to the long term, we knew that they provided an essential alternative to the high street banks. We said that allowing them to demutualise was wrong, not just because it stripped out the assets built up by successive generations of members, but also because mutual building societies provided the diversity and security within our financial system. But what happened? Halifax, Northern Rock, and the rest turned their back on their heritage and began indulging in unsustainable financial adventures. All an attempt to meet the insatiable demands of shareholders. And the result? Huge losses. Loyal staff made redundant, and people struggling to pay their mortgages made homeless. It's the same with globalization. We were the ones who warned that globalization and the turbo-driven capitalism that came with it were not only a means for multinationals to exploit the people and resources of the developing world, they were also a huge source of instability for the British economy. We knew that when the recession came, its impact would be more severe. And again, events have proved us right. The OECD is predicting that no other major economy will suffer more than the UK. We warned about the irresponsible use of oil and other resources. We knew that as oil becomes more scarce, its price would not only rise over time, it would also become more volatile. And so it proved. Oil rose to nearly $160 a barrel last year, helping to tip the world into recession. Now, we all know, of course, that pointing out to people that you were right is not a very popular activity. And we can take no pleasure in what has happened. We know what a recession means in terms of human misery. But we will say this, that the Green Party understood the folly behind the conventional wisdom. We warned against the consequences. We have never been afraid to tell it like it is, because we don't do afraid. And so will the politicians and the bankers look to us to help come up with some of the solutions? Well, I have something to report, and that is that some of them are beginning to do just that. Take the Green New Deal. For years, we've been pointing out the benefits to society that would come with a sustained investment in green measures like renewable energy and energy efficiency. The Green New Deal was born from that work, a costed and practical programme to invest in measures that will reduce carbon emissions, save people money, and generate hundreds of thousands of new green jobs. And according to research that we've done, almost 140,000 extra jobs could come from a programme of energy saving for every home in the country, 200,000 extra jobs in wind energy by 2020, and another 200,000 extra jobs in agriculture by increasing the supply of locally produced food. And about 50,000 of those jobs could come here to the northwest, along with many more in public transport, greener waste management, small-scale biogas production, and the installation and maintenance of solar panels on hundreds of thousands of roofs. Now this year, a year late, perhaps a generation late, but let's not quibble, Labour and the Conservatives have discovered some of these ideas for themselves. But tragically, at root, they still simply don't get it. Gordon Brown, for example, is planning a huge expansion of both nuclear power and coal. Yet nuclear is a dirty, dangerous, costly distraction. And even if carbon capture and storage technology were to prove both workable and economic, it won't be zero carbon, and it'll simply distract and divert investment away from renewables. And since nuclear and coal generate far fewer jobs than green energy, and decades later at best, make no mistake, neither of them has a useful role to play in tackling this challenge. The bottom line is that green policies on energy, on transport, on waste management, and on agriculture will deliver more jobs per megawatt, more jobs per mile, per tonne, and per acre. So let's be very clear that what's on offer from this government is not a Green New Deal, it's a Brown New Deal. And take the banking sector as well. The collapse of Lloyds TSB, of Halifax Bank of Scotland and the rest has been a disaster. The amount of taxpayers' money needed to prop them up is terrifying. And when you think what else that money could be used for, those hundreds of billions of pounds invested in tackling climate change, in improving services, in reducing inequality, it's enough, frankly, to make you weep. But the extraordinary position of this government owning huge swathes of the banking sector also brings an historic opportunity to put right the mistakes of the past. The Green Party is looking ahead to what we should do when the present crisis eases. Should we simply hand back the banks to the city to run? Even with better regulation, this would still risk a repeat of the credit crunch in years to come. And so instead, we're proposing that the government should use its position to restructure the UK banking sector. We want to see new, mutually owned financial institutions that will be insulated from the volatility of the stock market. We want to see more local and regional banks that would serve their local communities. We're talking to the leaders of the business community about how to make this work. And we're getting a very positive response because more and more people recognise that we simply can't go on the way things were. We cannot go back to how it was before. We've always had the ideas. Now we're winning the battle for them. And perhaps the greatest fight here is over who will pick up the bill for the current mess. The Labour government have decided who they want to make pay for it, not the bankers. They're walking away with knighthoods and pensions. Not Gordon Brown. He can't even bring himself to say sorry, let alone take responsibility and resign. And not the rich. Inequality in this country is now higher than it was under Thatcher. With the richest companies and individuals able to avoid taxes with impunity, that will only get worse. Now, Gordon Brown has decided that the bill should come to us, to ordinary people like you and me. He wants us to pay through higher taxes and through cuts in education, health, policing. Not this year, perhaps, but delaying the bill until after the election won't make it any less painful. And he wants us to pay by sacrificing our environment. He wants to use the excuse of the recession to push through deeply damaging and short-sighted projects like Heathrow and Kingsnorth. What an extraordinary betrayal. And with leaders like Brown, it's no surprise that this is being called the age of stupid. We know that the changing climate is the greatest threat to humanity. We've known that for a generation, and now the evidence is all around us in rising sea levels, melting glaciers, tropical storms, floods. And just 10 days ago, the terrifying forecast from the latest science that the Amazon forest is dying back faster than predicted and that sea level rises will be greater than expected. The scale of the challenge is clear. But what is the response of our government? Well, they say, it's up to us. Play your part, do your bit. No wonder people are confused. The greatest threat that this country faces, up there with international terrorism, the rise of fascism in the 1930s, and this government is telling us to change our light bulbs and turn our washing down to 30 degrees. Now, of course, there is a role for individual action. Of course, we should all be taking every step we can to minimize the impact of climate change. But it is for governments to take the lead. That is why governments are there. If the people could sort it out for themselves, we wouldn't need governments in the first place. What if William Wilberforce had said, yes, we know slavery is wrong, but we have to think about the economy, so could you just cut down a bit, own one slave instead of two? What if Emmeline Pankhurst had said, yeah, we want the vote for women, but we understand that people don't like change, so maybe our husbands could just ask us before they go and vote? What about London and the other major cities when they were suffering from killer smog in the 1950s? Does anyone say to them, would you just put a little less coal on your fire? Let us be very clear. This government has betrayed the people of Britain in the most fundamental way. They have not only failed to protect us, they have lied to us. They have pretended that they have the problem under control, that a few low-energy light bulbs here, a bit of lagging on your loft there, and the problem will go away. When Neville Chamberlain returned from Munich and waved that scrap of paper proclaiming peace in our time, at least he believed it. What excuse do our current leaders have? They have done nothing because they have sold their souls to vested interests. And so we come to the heart of it. Climate change, international development, the economy, social justice. They all come down to one common factor: politics. Because in the end, politics is no more and no less than how we decide things together, how we face up to the difficult questions and try to find the answers that give the greatest benefit to the majority without leaving anyone on the outside. I believe that this party, the Green Party, has a huge amount to contribute to the politics in this country. Not all the answers, of course not. But politics is the poorer because of the efforts of the other parties to exclude us. Now, if we had any doubts about the level of corruption in Parliament, they could hardly have survived the last few years. We've seen BAA and the airlines buy their way into the corridors of power to get the result they wanted on Heathrow. We have seen that level of corruption, and we know that we have something very different to offer, something much better to offer. And we know that we should be in all of the different chambers of this country. You know, look at the House of Lords. You see that they are managed to buy their way into the House of Lords. You have Peter Mandelson coming back to the House of Lords, and you can imagine how much we miss him in Brussels. But if it was someone trying to get into the House of Lords, someone who might champion the poor, or ask awkward questions, or show that you can be in politics and stick to your principles and still make a difference, then of course they shut the door in our face. But we are not giving up. We knew it wasn't going to be easy, and we're in it for the long haul. And we must remember, first of all, that we can win, that slavery was abolished. Women won the vote. Fascism was defeated. And second, we must remember that winning at all costs, winning by sacrificing our principles, would be no victory, but only a betrayal. And third, we must never forget the responsibility that we carry. What happens in this country does matter to the rest of the world. Whether it's the pollution that we produce, the resources we consume, the scope for our armed forces to be a force for good or the cause of greater instability, for us to provide leadership on climate change or to undermine progress. What we do nationally has an international impact. And in this party, we believe something quite simple, and yet something very powerful. And that is that everyone in the world is of equal value. And so I ask you to remember in your work on councils up and down the country, in your campaigning and in your communities, in working to see more Greens elected to the European Parliament and to local councils, and in preparing the ground for our first MPs in Parliament, remember who you are working for. Not just the people of this country, but for everyone in this world. For all of those who are struggling to make their voice heard, and for future generations without a voice. The Green Party is that voice. You are that voice. Thank you.